Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm back with part 2 on the simple ladies top. And this is going to be on a basic long sleeve. Now, I've already started on the top itself. So I've got the neck put in, the shoulders sewn. And if you did not see my first video, go ahead and check that video out right up here because you're going to want to know how to get this started. I'm just moving on to the next step where we're going to add the sleeves. Now right here I'm wearing a second top that I made out of the same fabric of that last video. This one I cut a little bit looser, and so the cap sleeves actually come down just a little bit farther, and it's just a little looser around, a little bit more comfortable, and this would be something I'd be more apt to wear out in public with one of my nice pretty patchwork skirts that you never get to see me wear because I never wear those for working around the house. Today we're moving on to making a long sleeve, and this is just going to be a simple long sleeve. I can show you how to make various other sleeves, and I'll probably do that in future videos. So today we're starting with just the basic long sleeve, and how you're going to want to do this is you're going to want to figure out, and remember we're working without a pattern, we're just going by measurement so that you can tailor the tops to fit you. Just like how big around you want it, you're going to want to measure yourself around and then figure out how many more inches you want to add, or take one of your favorite tops and the way it fits. It doesn't matter what top it is and the style of the top. If you like the way it fits around in various places, then measure that top across, or measure it all the way around in the circumference. And if you measure it straight across, lay it flat and measure it across, then you're going to want to double that number and then add another inch or so for your inseam. So now, working off of that, we're trying to figure out our sleeve. So just for just more of a straight line with a little bit of a taper long sleeve, you may not want it too big up here. So consider how big you want it, how loose you want it. Like if you want your sleeve to start fairly loose at the top, like here, then you're going to measure it to there, and so on and so forth. It just depends. Now, if I was to go off this shirt here, that this flannel that I'm wearing, I could measure around that and go basically off that, or take the shirt, lay it out, lay the sleeve out flat, measure across, and then double that number, plus add another inch for the inseam. There's several different ways you can look at it. What you're wanting to do is tailor it to suit you. Now, I already have my sleeve pieces cut out, and these are just long rectangles. I actually wanted to make them a little bit longer than this so I could make a more tapered sleeve and bunch it, but this was all the fabric I had to work with for this. And so I'm just going to keep it real simple. I still plan on tapering it, but I'm going to start with a rectangle just as it is. So I already have it the size I want. Again, this is basically based on what was left, but I checked it to make sure this is going to be plenty enough for my sleeve, and it certainly is. So then I'm going to point the camera down towards here now, and I'm going to show you how you want to lay your sleeve out on your shirt. So basically what you do, once you get your sleeve figured out, if you're doing a long rectangle, it doesn't matter, just do it like that. Doesn't matter what end you start from. Just make sure that once you fold your sleeve in half, lay it out so that the fold of the sleeve is directly onto the seam of the shoulder of your top. And then pin that, open it up and pin that into place. It's wanting to stick together on me there. Okay? And then open your sleeve up the rest of the way and pin that into place as well. Making sure you don't stretch the fabric, simply lay it out flat. Make sure the whole thing is flat, lay it, and don't stretch it at all. Get it lined up nice and straight, and then pin your two ends. Once you have that pinned into place along the shoulder seam, you're going to go ahead and sew that part together, starting from one end with the sleeve on the top side, making sure your right sides are together, if I didn't say that already. And double it over. And again, I always like to use a zigzag stitch when I'm doing this kind of stuff on a seam. I narrow up the zigzag stitch a little bit, but so it's not too wide, but I just like the hold and stretch of the zigzag better. And then when I get to where the shoulder seam is, I like to reverse over it just to add a little extra security there. And then same thing at the beginning of the stitch and at the end of the stitch. I hit that reverse and forward again just to lock it into place really well. Turn your top so that right sides are together and line up where the seams are. Okay, make sure those are lined up perfectly, just like you centered your sleeve onto the shoulder. That part there is probably the most complicated part. The rest of this is pretty easy. Now, if you want to keep your sleeve rectangular like this, what you're going to have is you're going to have a loose sleeve like this all the way down. Okay, but what I'm doing here is I went ahead on this other sleeve and I started stitching here, leaving about an inch or so right there because I want to hem it over just for looks, and then tapered it out because I don't want this big and baggy down here if it's going to be a long sleeve. I want it to taper in so it doesn't get in my way. Even though I don't wear long sleeves like this around the house for working in because they're just too much of a pain, I still don't want this getting in my way, so I like having a tapered sleeve when it comes to one that long. So since I did that, kind of spur of the moment, decided to do it that way, what I want to do is make sure, again, I line these ends up perfectly, and then I'm going to put my pin on this sleeve right where I started the stitching on the other so that they match. Okay, so I'll pin it right there. And then obviously I'm just going to cut this. All right, but I'm going to wait until I try it on to make sure this is where I want it, because I don't want to cut this and decide, I'd like to have it a little bit looser, though I doubt that's going to happen. Or maybe I want to taper it out a little bit quicker out here. Most likely I'm going to want to taper it in more than out, but I'd like to try it on first. After trying that on, I've decided I want to taper this in just a little bit more and then a little bit in this way. So I'm going to do that first, and then I'm going to repin my other sleeve. Not too much, just a little bit. So you want to start out going straight just for a little ways, and then start moving outwards. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and trim this excess off. And again, you can have your sleeve shaped before you sew it together. I'm just kind of trying to show you a couple options while I'm doing this. So I'm sort of trying to do two things at once. So now what I want to do is repin this and bring it in a little bit farther. And what you may want to do, I just sew things. I don't worry too much about it getting exact. I just kind of follow the basic line according to what looks right. So bringing that in just a hair. But it would be a good idea to get some chalk if you're going to taper it like this and you like the way this first sleeve looks, and then draw yourself a line. I don't have any chalk handy. I should. I keep meaning to put some over here. So I'm just going to take my permanent marker and draw a light line right about where I want that stitching to go. Bringing it across. You may even want to pin the one sleeve to the other before you do this. Again, I'm one that I just put the fabric together and just start sewing, and I'll do the same on both sides instead of trying to worry about getting it absolutely perfect. Okay, so starting from where I had the pin and following my line there, sewing down straight for a bit and then just coming across. My line's really sloppy, but I'm not concerned about it because I'm going to trust myself on this. I can also always tailor it as needed as I go. Okay, so now work your way towards the armpit, and here's the part where you want to also take extra care. Some of this other stuff is easy to fix, but this thing here, when you get to the armpit, what you want to do is you want to open up. Don't sew it square like this. You don't want to do this. You want to open this up wide like this, like I showed you around the neckline of the top where you're doing the hem. That's optional. You can do it square on that, but this is important. You don't do it square. You want to open this up as wide as you can so you end up with a nice curve, just barely a curve, if that. You want that stitch going across that armpit where all those seams come together. As straight as possible. Okay, and then you're just going to sew all the way down. And here's an option too, if you're doing a pretty long tunic-like top, you may want to consider leaving some slits on the side. So having it, so if it's coming down to past your hips, maybe mid-thigh, you might want to have those slits come up. So that's the beauty of this top. You can make it like a tunic. You can make it like just a regular length top, however you want. You can still add these little slits on the side just for ease and comfort. I'm going to go ahead and sew this all the way down. And I used to do that a lot when I'd make these tops. I made a whole bunch of them. And then again, double it. You're stitching right there wherever it is you end, whether it be that you end up here and then you have the slit. You're still going to want to double it because that's going to be the part where it's going to be most likely to come out. And then when you go to hem around the bottom of the shirt, you're obviously going to hem up and around that slit just like you would around the neckline of the top. Okay, so now let me cut off my excess here. And then we're going to turn the top right side out. And basically all I have left to do is make sure that this is the fit that I want is for the sleeves, which it feels pretty good to me. I'm liking the fit of that. And then I'm just going to hem the sleeves and the bottom of the shirt, and then I'm done. Okay, so hemming the sleeves is probably, when you have it narrow like this, it's going to be a little tricky working around there, because it's just a real narrow thing. Now remember, this is typically made with a stretch knit, so you only need to fold it once for your hem. But if you're worried about it showing, you may want to fold it twice just for a nicer look. Me, I'm just going to keep it. I'm going to do a wide stitch, a wide zigzag. You want this to be a zigzag, or if you have a serger, you can use a serger for this, because you're going to want it to have stretch, especially the way I did this tighter around the wrist. So anyway, it's going to be a little trickier working around this because it's narrow, but it's really not that hard. You just hem it in a circle till you get to the other side. To go slow with that, and you might even want to stretch it just a hair while you're sewing it. That'll make sure that it has plenty of stretch, but not too much, because it will give it a warped look. If you pull it too much while you're sewing it, then it's going to look kind of warped and funny, and so you just don't want to stretch it too much. A little bit is okay as long as you're careful with how much you're doing. Okay, now I'll finish hemming out this and the bottom. I don't think you need to see all that. And then I'll show you the completed project. All right, well, I finished out the shirt, as you can see, and I have it on super comfortable, and I really love it. I'll be wearing this quite a bit. Now, just a couple pointers, things that I would do different on this particular top, which I may bother with and I may not. And that would be to make this part of the sleeve just a little bit tighter, because you have to account for, and I didn't think about this, some stretching going on when you're wearing it. So if you got this shirt, you may want to pull your sleeves up depending on what you're doing, which I always tend to pull my sleeves up when I'm wearing shirts like this. And you're going to want to make sure they stay in place. First of all, that's going to stretch it out anyway, so that when you bring it down to here, it's going to be loose on your wrist. If you don't mind that, no big deal. But I also want to make sure it's going to stay in place when I pull it up. The second thing I would do differently on this particular sleeve, because of the way I made it to fit just to here, is to taper this part in the center out more, because see what happens when it's stretched out, it has kind of a bowed look. It's really not that big a deal, and it's highly doubtful anyone would ever notice. And so I'm not even going to bother messing with that because it feels so comfortable as is. But if you make your sleeve wider at the top so that it has almost more of a bat wing kind of look, then having it tapered like this is going to flow into it a lot nicer than the way I have it here. So just some things to consider. Just bring that taper in a little bit more and have it be a little bit more of a gradual thing where it comes in tight around the wrist and not quite so this way, if you know what I'm saying. And if I remember, I'll try to show that better in another video. Now, some things you can do with this top to dress it up. You know, you can just wear it loose and comfy around the house, or you can simply add a belt to it, and that will just give it a more dressed up, kind of completed look. And that is sort of like what I did with my bridesmaids dresses or outfits, is they just made them a simple sash. They actually wore the top tucked into their skirt and then the sash over the top. There's several different options you can do with it, and that's what makes this style just so wonderful, because it's very, very versatile. It can be dressy, it can be casual, it can be somewhere in between, whatever it is that you need it for. Really simple to fix. Now, I do have other videos I'll be doing in the future on sleeves with a couple of other options, including a poet style sleeve, which is a lot easier than you think. I made some of those. I just came up with the idea myself when I made some costumes for a traditional English dance that we did in our Dances Around the World show, and I'll show you a couple pictures of that right here. And I've used that sleeve pattern, that same idea, in all kinds of stuff like the Belle's dress and Beauty and the Beast and so many other different ones. And eventually I think what I'll do is put a slideshow together of a bunch of the different costumes I made, and just from our different dance shows and stuff, because I think some of you may enjoy that, and it'd probably be fun. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new, and be watching for more of these videos coming down the road. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.